Recently, I've been talking about a lot of new items in Path of Exile, since it looks like 3.18 won't be getting any major balance changes, but it has been getting some very nice unique items, be it Flesh and Flame combos with ascendancies you can't get anywhere else, or a ring made by Lighty that can enable a pseudo-fortify effect. These items are rewards for the recent boss kill event, and as a result, they come from Uber content. This means they won't be particularly common. But the Maven isn't particularly common either, and her builds are still a couple of chaos. So if the items aren't used very much, they aren't necessarily going to be expensive. To be completely honest with you, today's video's really been weighing on me. It's been weighing on me because this involves Righteous Fire. And sometimes, talking about builds can be a heavy burden, especially if the things you're saying don't align with the public consensus. And so, today, I'm going to be talking about why Burden of Truth might be the solution that Righteous Fire Inquisitor needs, rather than Replica Soul Tether. But to start with, a little bit of history on Replica Soul Tether and Righteous Fire. The main reason to use Replica Soul Tether is it gives you the Corrupted Soul Keystone. This causes 50% of damage to pierce energy shield, note Chaos will still completely pierce, and gives you 15% of life as extra max CS. It's been common to use this for a long time on Headhunter builds, and now more recently, it's been pretty common to use it on Righteous Fire as well, with one of the assumptions being that once you get to late in the endgame, you'll switch to an Aegis Aurora setup with Melding of the Flesh instead. Here's the problem. Based on prices from 3.17, Aegis Aurora cost 130 to 180 chaos early on, with a decent melding roll being closer to an Exalt. Which, if we assume that's another 100C, means 230 to 280 chaos. Replica Soul Tether, on the other hand, cost 500 to 700, or maybe 400 to 700 if we're being really generous. Now, I do think if you can get a cheap Glorious Vanity and fit Corrupted Soul in, it's a pretty good thing to do day 1 or day 2. But if the option is ever, do I get Aegis Aurora, or do I get one of these examples, you will get Aegis Aurora. And at least based on past history, Aegis Aurora has been roughly as affordable, if not in some cases, more affordable than the alternatives. Furthermore, if you can fit Melding of a Flesh in, you should absolutely do so, as it adds a ton of elemental defenses. You can do this before you get Aegis, or after you get Aegis, and that's all down to price. After all, if Melding is 20C and Aegis is 200, you're definitely going to want to get Melding first and Aegis second. Even when you account for adding a few more resists on gear, the price will be roughly the same, if not a little cheaper. But if the question is, should I go for Corrupted Soul or Aegis Aurora? All things being equal, go for Aegis Aurora. If Corrupted Soul is significantly cheaper, then go for that. And if you found this video helpful, or generally been enjoying my unique series, be sure to leave a like on the video, as it really helps out in the YouTube algorithm. Then sub to the channel and ring the bell to find out what my League Start build will be, as that should go live tomorrow. For now, let's start talking about the Burden of Truth, a new unique belt that was designed, of course, by Lighty. The Burden of Truth is on a crystal base, which means it's pretty decent for Righteous Fire. It grants 36% increased life recovery from flasks, which I'm going to guess is 30 to 40 or maybe 30 to 50, which normally wouldn't be a great mod, but given that it also grants Supreme Decadence, a timeless keystone which says life recovery from flasks also applies to energy shield, note also not instead of, so it'll still recover your life, and then 30% life recovery from flasks, well, you're going to need that increased life recovery to help balance that out. The two will multiply together, so if it is 40%, 1.4 times 0.7 is 0.98, meaning you'll recover about the same as you did before. And then, the Burden of Truth has two other lines of text which are really interesting. 33% of chaos damage taken does not bypass energy shield. This means if you're dealing with poisons, chaos damage over time, or even chaos from hits, more of it's going to splash against your energy shield buffer, even if you have Aegis Aurora. On the other hand, 33% of non-chaos damage taken bypasses energy shield, which means you still get some of that splitting effect that people like from Corrupted Soul. Now, I don't know if these numbers have a range. They could be 30 to 35, or they could be a flat 33%. But why is it so bad to have damage splashing over to your life if you're using Aegis Aurora? The simple answer is because you don't want damage hitting your life when you have Aegis Aurora. Between Aegis Aurora and Divine Shield, you have massive amounts of ES recovery. If you watch the background RF gameplay closely, you'll notice that while my ES goes down, it almost immediately pops back up. This either means A, I got hit and blocked, and Aegis recovered a massive amount of my ES, or because I got hit for physical damage recently, I'm regenerating a massive amount of my ES via Divine Shield. Now, if you typically play in low damage situations, such as you run all of your maps alked and you don't really have any rippy modifiers, you avoid them all. You're not clicking altars and you're not juicing your content. Then you might not notice damage piercing as a bad thing. But the minute you go into Delve, the minute you go into Simulacrum, or the minute you try to do incredibly juiced Delirious content, you'll start to notice some strange deaths. I know this because I noticed some strange deaths. I noticed that I'd die and I'd still have almost full energy shield. What this meant was, my energy shield could easily keep up with the damage that I was taking. But 50% of the damage was going through my energy shield to my life. And while I do have quite a lot of life recovery, even for an RF build, the amount of damage that was getting through was still too much. And so this is why you don't want to combine Aegis Aurora and Replica Soul Tether. This is why you don't want to combine Aegis Aurora and Divine Soul. Does this mean you won't want to combine Aegis Aurora and Burden of Truth? I'm not sure. If you're not using a Life Flask, you definitely don't want to combine Aegis Aurora and Burden of Truth. But if you are using a Life Flask, it might actually be worth it to have the belt. Because a 33% pierce isn't necessarily as dangerous as a 50% pierce. And especially when you can top yourself with a Life Flask, you should have enough recovery that you'll be able to survive. If you don't, obviously switch away from the belt. And if a belt ends up being extremely expensive, let's say in the range of 2 or 3 exalts, you'll probably be better served by a rare Stygian Vice anyway. On the other hand, if it's cheap, if it's overlooked, or if it's simply undervalued, maybe it's too common since a lot of people are farming the new Uber bosses, then the Burden of Truth could be the perfect solution. And so, do I think you should never use Replica Soul Tether as a Righteous Fire build? If prices for Replica Soul Tether and Aegis Aurora remain the same as they did in 3.17, you should never use Replica Soul Tether on a Righteous Fire build. If you have to pick one, Aegis Aurora is simply better, and at every point that I could remember within 3.17, Aegis Aurora was cheaper than Replica Soul Tether. Now, if week 1 Aegis Aurora is 10 exalts, and Replica Soul Tether is 1 exalt, that does change that up. Then you'd use Replica Soul Tether as a stepping stone, and swap to Aegis when you can afford it. But don't forget about the Burden of Truth, because it could be that you'll get an effect very similar to Replica Soul Tether for 50 chaos, 20 chaos, or maybe if people really overlook it, as little as 5 chaos. If you plan to play RF, I encourage you to experiment with a Burden of Truth. But keep in mind, if you ever have to choose between Aegis Aurora and Burden of Truth or Replica Soul Tether, or even allocating Corrupted Soul via a Legion Jewel, Aegis Aurora will be your best bet, and the defenses are, quite honestly, without equal. But what do you think? Is Burden of Truth going to be a best-in-slot belt for Righteous Fire Inquisitor in 3.18? Or do you think it'll end up as a bit of a trap because it'll be super expensive and still have anti-synergistic behavior when combined with Aegis Aurora? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, be sure to put them down in the comments below, or join the Discord where you can ask questions, get build help, and hang out with the community. A special thanks to my patrons and YouTube channel members. They're awesome, and they get to show it by having their name on screen in the credits of all my videos. So if you want to see your name here, be sure to check the link in the description. For more general gaming content, check out my second channel, 10 Gaming Thoughts, and if you want a water bottle or a cool shirt, I have a link to my official merch shop in the description. I hope you learned something today, and I hope to see you again sometime soon.